Welcome back, listeners, to SUR ROUND SOUND. Darius is here, joined by Matt. How's it going, Matt?
Going well. How about you? How's everything going on your side?
Everything's all right with me. We're having a heat wave over here in Southern California. I was in Utah last week on a little road trip with my dad, spending some time with him, and it was like 120, which is like 40 degrees Celsius. So,
oof, that's global warming.
Yep, global warming for you. And then I heard that like East Coast is pretty stormy, and then it's also like hot as well. How are things in Taiwan? How's the weather over there?
It's better. It's better than last year. Usually this time it should be a lot more humid, a lot more like dead weather. Because if you go out, you just could be sweating with salt water on your face and on your entire body. But turns out it's not really that way. It's just a little bit salt water.
All right.
That makes it better.
Yeah, we're recording this in July, so it totally makes sense that now it's kind of like the start of the heat waves everywhere. So, and then the off-season stuff like in different parts of the world. So, cool. I'm glad you're here, Matt. Today, everybody, we have a really wonderful guest. This guest is a dear friend to both Matt and myself. He is a composer, violinist, multi-instrumentalist. He's based in Brooklyn, New York. He recently graduated from NYU Steinhardt, like my Matt and I did, with a composition degree, a theory and composition degree, and he's worked with a lot of really amazing people. He's been in numerous prestigious programs like the New York Youth Symphony's comp program, the Imani Winds Chamber Music Festival, as well as working with the Jack String Quartet recently, which is really great. He also got to study abroad in Paris during his undergrad at the L'École Normale de Musique de Paris school, which is also where our friend Oscar Pan also studied at. We're really happy to have him here. Please give a warm welcome to Zach Mezzo. How are you, Zach?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. That was quite an introduction. You really pulled up like all my musical history there.
Well, I mean, I didn't really. I know you. We've known each other.
I know.
For years, so it's not that difficult to think about a friend.
You make me sound really interesting, so that's great. Thank you.
Well, you are really interesting. That's why you're here. So I'm really glad you're here, and I can tell Matt's glad you're here. On our call, we can see Matt smiling, a big cheeky smile. So, Matt, do you have anything to say to Zach upon first sight?
I think Darius probably pulled through your LinkedIn profile in order to get that right. So
Sure I did. Okay, so Zach, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what you've been working on recently? Just a little bit of like, what have you been up to? What sort of musical style have you been focused on? I know you as a concert composer. You know, your focus is on a lot of contemporary style of writing. But what do you have to share?
Well, I mean, I'm always kind of doing a little bit of composing here and there, but since I graduated, I've kind of been taking a little break from the like constant like score writing and stuff like that. Been doing a lot of performing recently. I've been playing violin with this band called Catcher. So that's kind of been my main like musical outlet of late. But yeah, I mean, I'm always writing different things. I've got my little recording set up here. I'll do some little recording projects here and there, but kind of like got some bigger projects that are like on hold for the moment. Just taking a little break and doing also some teaching. Been teaching a lot, violin lessons mainly. Just kind of adjusting to life after college, I guess.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely say that as a fellow practicing artist, a lot of what we're doing these days is teaching, putting ourselves out there and creating our own little network, not just of people that we can like help grow with their own musical direction and journeys, but also people above us that might be willing to give us a chance. So I totally get it, man. It's really wonderful. What you're working on is really relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. So what we're doing today, listeners and friends, is we're bringing back the top 3 round-robin format that we introduced in Season 1. And this time, we're going to go around and share some of our top 3 shows. And by shows, show is a really general term. We're basically going to go around and talk about, 3 of our favorite all-time big, large-scale performances that we've been to. So operas, ballets, musicals, some kind of big incidental concert, a contemporary piece, anything really, any large scale performance that we have attended or that we've seen or that we've studied or listened to that has like a large instrumentation, large vocals, large dance, big dance company, etc. And I think it's going to be fun. We're getting to share a little bit more out of ourselves. We all have 3 very different dynamic points of view of the artistic music production world. We definitely have a variety of content that we've both experienced, been a part of, played in, and shared with other people. So it's going to be fun and it's going to be chill. So a couple things that everybody should know, as we do this, is that when one person is, when one of us is sharing, why we chose to share this piece as one of their top 3, after we present the piece, we listen a little bit to a little sample insert of it, another one of us will comment and, maybe question their choice, share some thoughts, initial reactions if the piece is unfamiliar to them, and we'll just take it from there. It'll just be a very casual round table going around, just, hey man, listen to this, or hey, what do you think of this? So I think what we'll do for the order is we can let Matt start, and then Zach can ease in, and then I'll do my number 3, and then we'll just go around in a circle like that. So Matt, why don't you start this session off? What's your number 3 favorite show?
Yes, my number 3 favorite show, I came out with a banger. Probably most of our listeners will be extremely familiar with this musical show. It's Hamilton. And the reason why I really like Hamilton, now a lot of people don't know me as a hip hop type of person, even though I do listen to some of the hip hop. The real reason why I pick Hamilton at my number 3, even though it's actually kind of a very new music, is because of the historical context that this music has been placed within this entire work that makes it such a masterpiece itself. The cultural fusion between historical context and the national patriotism of hip hop, making hip hop, because hip hop is where America created hip hop, just like how America created the musical style. So the fusion of 2 made it basically, if they're parents, the baby is Hamilton. And this is why I love Hamilton so much. It's able to embrace the style of hip hop and as well as musical and make such a historical masterpiece. And also the historical context of this work makes it such a masterpiece. This is why I picked Hamilton as my number 3.
Nice. All right, well, let's take a listen to this insert you recommended.
After a week of fighting, a young man in a red coat stands on a parapet.
We lower our guns as he frantically waves their white handkerchief.
And just like that, it's over. We tend to our wounded, we count our dead.
Black and white soldiers wonder alike if this really means freedom.
Not yet.
We negotiate the terms of surrender. I see George Washington smile. We escort their men out of Yorktown. They stagger home single file. Tens of thousands of people flood the streets. There are screams and church bells ringing. And as our fallen foes retreat, I hear the drinking song they're singing.
The world turned upside down. 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 Down, 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 down. Freedom for America, freedom for France.
Gotta start a new nation, gotta meet my son.
We won, we won, we won, we won. The world turned upside down.
The reason why I chose this excerpt was because it's actually a fusion of both how lyrical and also how virtuosic it is. And also this musical, as probably our listeners can tell, it's set, you can probably hear names that you're very familiar with: George Washington, and in this case, Hamilton, and also Lafayette, the Lafayette Street in the New York City. So as you can tell, this is actually set in during the American Revolution, and this is why I love this musical so much, so much, because it just has that like patriotism embedded in the entire musical, and that's why I picked Hamilton as my number 3.
Really cool, dude. I totally see why this came to mind. I bet when you first saw this, did you see Hamilton in person? Did you ever attend the show?
No, you know what? You know what's funny is that one of my friends. Okay, so if it wasn't for COVID, a friend of mine we were gonna watch Hamilton during our graduation year, but COVID kind of screwed us over. So that was unfortunate.
I see. Yeah, I imagine then it must have been a really even if you didn't see it live, I imagine it must have been a really big like moment for you when you first heard this. When you first like sat down and took a listen to like this soundtrack or this album. I definitely feel the sort of pop vibe that it brings off, like totally defying the musical Broadway-esque style of the 20th century with the use of rap and hip hop elements and rhythms. So I think it's very cool. I mean, Zach, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to see the show a couple of years ago, and I was like, I mean, super impressed, like seeing it live. It definitely left a big like impact on me. I feel like a lot of people are like kind of critical of like Lin-Manuel Miranda like more recently, because I feel like, and like I definitely empathize with that, because like some of the historical elements are like maybe a little bit like candy coated, because it's like just turning these like white like founding fathers into like people of color doesn't necessarily like just cover over all the things that like were like bad about it. But I mean, as a show, I really enjoyed it, and like I feel like it's a little harsh to kind of just completely like dunk on Lin-Manuel, because like he definitely didn't know that it was going to become like this like huge cultural phenomenon either. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, to be honest, but I definitely did enjoy it when I went to see the show, and I enjoy a lot of the music still. So yeah.
Exactly. I mean, political relevance is definitely a phenomenon that always comes out in shows. In fact, later when we listen to someone else's selection, there's a certain composer who also has a great deal of political relevance and controversy surrounding them, whose name will not be spoiled yet until we get to them. Matt, thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely, I believe you have shared something of Hamilton before, whether it was in one of our Music of the Week segments or in a different episode. Gives me all the more reason to actually like sit down and listen to the full album. And one day, once we're all back in New York, go and see the show whenever it comes back. Because I mean, I imagine that in this world of COVID, productions, this genre that we're talking about, this really broad concept of shows, is going to be the last thing to come back to the world, once this whole pandemic is over. So, yeah. All right, so let's go on to the number 3 of Mr. Mezzo.
Yeah, so my number 3, this was kind of a cheat entry, I'm not going to lie, but I'll justify it, I promise. So mine was, it's called The BQE by Sufjan Stevens, which is it was a film, but the original premiere of it was like a live showing of the film with a live orchestra. So to me, this was like, it feels very theatrical, very much like a show, as you were saying, Darius. And so there are also dancers in the movie, so it feels, there's some like ballet kind of connotations there as well. And I recently moved to Brooklyn, and right outside my window is the actual BQE itself, the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. And so I feel like recently I've been very much connecting with this album, and like it's just a really interesting kind of collection of like orchestral score elements, and then also some more like typical like Sufjan Stevens kind of production, like some electronic elements as well. And it just like, I don't know, it just really spoke to me, and I think it's and the film is also really beautiful. There are these like 3 dancers that kind of appear periodically through, and they have hula hoops, and then it cuts back between these other like kind of shots of New York and the BQE. And yeah, I mean, I really love his style, and I think this is a great example of kind of the bringing out the sort of orchestrations that usually are just accompanying his songs, and now the orchestrations kind of get to take the forefront and really be the main sort of story here. And so I really appreciate that as someone who likes this kind of things a lot. So.
Beautifully said. Now, do you think you could, maybe just quickly before we listen, do you think you could give us a little bit of context on who Sufjan Stevens is? I've never heard of him before.
Yeah, I mean, he's like I would say singer-songwriter. He's released a lot of albums. He was the guy who did that, was going to do the like 50 state album project, like writing an album for every state. Like he worked with Nico Muhly and Bryce Dessner on the album Planetarium, which is like a really fantastic album. Like that's probably my favorite album of his. It's just incredible. If that was a show, I maybe would have picked that one, but I felt that the BQE was more of a show, so I wanted to pick that one instead.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool, dude. Thank you for that.
Sure.
All right, let's take a quick listen to the first movement titled In the Countenance of Kings. Really cool, dude. Like my first initial reaction to this, I felt so many different colors. I totally get a sense of almost impressionism. There was one moment where the use of piano as a tool for like harmonic expansion reminded me entirely of Sunrise by Ravel from Daphnis and Chloe, and I just totally got that full sense of like, wow, this is something so contemplative, so reflective, yet at the same time so hopeful, so full of hope. Something similar to something like David Maslanka might write, like his On This Bright Morning, but the concert band work. I totally get that sort of instrumental appeal. You know, it's fascinating, really great, and I also noticed that like the album cover, you know, it's like an early morning like rush to work in New York City on a highway, and I think that's a really like interesting alternate visual perspective too for those of us, you know, who haven't seen the show.
Like checking out the film, because I think it is kind of a, at some points it feels like a contrast, like, you know, the kind of, you know, like harshness of the city and like the road and the cars and everything, but it's also beautiful at the same time. And I think it really, I mean, it's perfect for the imagery in the film. I would definitely check it out. But yeah, I really, something like, I was just thinking about it while we were listening to this, and like I love how it's obviously like a traditional kind of, not necessarily traditional, but largely traditional kind of classical music, you know, instruments, right? There's like also a vibraphone in there, which is like not that untraditional in itself, but the way that they record it is more of like a kind of pop, like rock sensibility, right? With like lots of like more close mics and like, you know, having the piano, and it's like you kind of get that interesting sound quality of a production of like a studio album, but you get the sound palette of an orchestra, which is like something that I really like, and I like those kind of, you know, maybe unexpected things that can happen in an orchestra that you wouldn't necessarily get if you just heard it in a concert hall.
One thing that I really like about this recording is that everything came in waves. It wasn't as though like we had this one humongous phrase where you have to slowly grind it to there. But this one it sort of came to wave, and it's just like what Darius said. It sounded like the Sunrise from Daphnis and Chloe by Ravel. But the first thing that it reminded me of was, by the way, it's because the reason why we're making so much analogy is because like Darius and I have never heard of this piece before. But my analogy is more the ending, the finale of West Side Story. It's just those like little moments. It's not like this one big phrase where there is one of our composers can come to that. It's just this like these moments, and then it's just like different colors, different shades of the same color, kind of just being thrown at us. Not really being thrown at us, but aesthetically thrown at us. that makes it you know what, this music is so beautiful in its own right. It's not like it's not like the other beauty that we really talk about, but this has its own set of beauty that I really enjoy just listening as a listener, as a first timer. And it's also speaking of the orchestra is actually quite interesting. A lot of like the blending with like the percussions with a lot of the strings, and then just so I hear a solo trombone, and then all of a sudden blended with like, it's just very interesting because it doesn't blend very well, but it's the reason why it doesn't blend very well is because like those like distinct colors just shine out very well.
Yeah,
and I think that's what makes it so great and makes it so amazing.
Yeah, well, I feel like that kind of goes along with like what I was saying, because like maybe this orchestration wouldn't work very well in a live setting. Like the natural kind of levels and blend of these instruments might not sound good, but when you're in the studio, you can make things happen that wouldn't otherwise be possible, and you can get some pretty cool results. So that's I find that stuff very interesting. It's like that's a very like film composer sort of like way of thinking. It's like, oh, I'll put this harp like pianissimo close mic, but then we just like boost it up and then you can hear it. So it's like it's it's like modern orchestration.
and I will share one thing too that I noticed is that another like compositional genre that came to my mind upon listening after my moment where I realized, oh, this feels impressionist, I felt a sort of minimalism as well. Like I could have seen Philip Glass in that type of setting. Like with one of his symphonies. Like I remember NYU, when we were all in undergrad, our first or second year, we did like a Philip Glass festival concert series in the orchestras, where where we played the first symphony, his low symphony, and then the second symphony. And I just remember from that experience that like that same sort of repetitiveness does feel sort of like a fresh experience each time. In terms of writing and harmonization. So. Yeah, very cool.
I think a lot like I mean, I don't know him personally, but based on a lot of his other music, I think Sufjan is definitely like down with minimalism. Like there's a lot of those little hints in some of his other work. So I think that's a good call.
Hints is the perfect word. Yeah. And I'm going to use that word hints to go into my number 3. Matt will recall from our last top 3 episode that I was the one out of the trio that likes to break the rules, and mine is sort of a rule breaker. My number 3 choice is a rule breaker. It is a standard. It's one that everybody kind of already knows to a degree. But the reason why I picked this one is because I felt that there was something really special and important from the visual perspective. When we play this insert, we're gonna watch a video of a live performance, like, and have that be there when we're watching. This piece that I picked is the ballet Swan Lake by the great Peter Tchaikovsky, and Matt is smiling with anger at me for this decision. But I know that there's some value to this. I'm not picking the typical spot, the da 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 da. I'm not doing that spot. I'm doing somewhere else, and I'll explain why I picked this after we watch it.
First of all, gosh, Darius, you're such a meme that you had to break the rules for this one, because you know what's the problem with breaking the rules is that last time it took you number 2 to break the rules, and now you broke the rule on the spot, like right here and there. You know what's the bigger problem is that you had to break the rule with one of my favorite ballets of all time, Swan Lake, Swan Lake, Swan Lake. I love Swan. Swan Lake is one of my favorite ballet. Right, it's literally right behind The Rite of Spring, and I love this ballet so much. But speaking about Swan Lake, I love your pick because it's actually not. First of all, it's not the very classic white swan, and then when she saw the prince, it's actually the black swan. I think it was the black swan seducing the prince. Actually, that scene. So I love the entire Swan Lake, and this is actually a very great pick. I watched the first time when I watched Swan Lake, I watched it without the orchestra. And that was a very bizarre experience because now you're just completely focused on the ballerina, and the ballerina, when she did it, it just seemed very rigid, although it was from the Russian ballet company, but it just seemed very rigid. And now that I see it from the YouTube link that you sent it to us, you could tell like the fluidity of her movements and the wings when she spreads them. Oh, I miss ballet, man.
I totally feel you there, bro. Like in 2019, when everything was totally like normal, as it were. That word "normal" is changing, but anyway, when it was like that, I actually did get to see Swan Lake that summer. So I guess exactly 2 years ago, I went to the Ahmanson Theater, which is right across the street from the Walt Disney Concert Hall. And I also watched the ballet live without an ensemble playing. It was a recording. So everything was entirely focused on the dancers. And I just felt, the reason why I picked this excerpt of the dance with the black swan as opposed to the white swan, because I felt like there was something about that particular moment in the production that was very vocal. There's a moment of intimacy in that, where the main character, the prince, feels totally infatuated. In fact, completely oblivious to the truth that, he doesn't really love her. And it just feels as though it should be right. But there's that certain tingency, or tingency is not a word. There's that certain tinge towards a reality that is not there. And I just felt like that was something that I had to bring out. And I never got to listen to the full Swan Lake, or I never really got around to it until I saw it live, and then I just started ripping the whole ballet at home, like for the following few weeks after, and then it became one of my personal favorites.
What's interesting is that you actually brought up the contrast between the white swan and the black swan, and it's actually, this contrast is emphasized very well in the movie Black Swan. That like the white swan is kind of like the symbol of like innocence, and the black swan is the symbol of seduction. And Black Swan is seducing the prince in this scene. Is one of the seduction scene, and then there's the 30 twirl thingy. I don't know what's that called in the ballet world, but there's that 30 twirl thingy, and then he's completely infatuated and impressed, and that's what made him fall in love. But it's funny that you brought that up, because the seduction scene was such an important moment of this entire story, and ultimately that led to the entire tragedy of the entire ballet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Zach, as someone that doesn't hang out in this realm of music as much anymore, what do you think of what I shared?
I've never seen this ballet, and I'm familiar with like some of the more famous parts, but I've never really like dug into it, I guess. But the main thing that I was thinking of, I was just like, man, Tchaikovsky really writes great like string parts, and I miss playing in orchestra a lot. Like that was like the main thing I was thinking about. I was just like, wow, I miss playing orchestra music. Like it's been such a long time, just because like even before COVID was happening, like I wasn't getting to play an orchestra as much, just because I was focused on composing and stuff, and didn't have as much time to play an orchestra as I would like. But yeah, I mean it's great music. It's just really satisfying, like writing. It's just great orchestra writing, and I miss it a lot.
Yeah. So it was a very metaphysical experience for you.
Yeah. No, I mean it's like it's not like something that I would usually like just go towards, but like, I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course. And I saw too that when we were watching this, listeners, Zach was very like keenly like mesmerized by what was going on. I know his eyes. I know what direction, the ways his eyes go over the years. So
I gotta be careful. Darius is always watching.
No, of course. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. So why don't we take a quick break, and we'll come back for some more top 3 round robin, top 3 show productions here on SUR Round Sound. Alright, we are back here on SUR Round Sound for our top 3 shows / productions round robin discussion with myself, Matt, and the fantastic Zach Mezzo. So, here we go. Let's continue. Let's jump right in with our number 2s. So, Mr. Tung, what do you have for your number 2?
This is the hardest pick of my lifetime, I would say, because I had to pick a Richard Wagner, but for most of my listeners who know me very well, I love all Wagner stuff. And I basically range picking from the Ring Cycle all the way to Tristan and Isolde, and they were just all too long to insert a sample, and I just love them all equally. They're all my kids. So, but I came into a realization that I had to pick one. And this was one of my favorite production and one of the very few Wagner operas that I have watched my entire life, which is Parsifal. The story Parsifal is based on, and I think it's Arthurian, the 12th Night. I don't know what that's called specifically, but it's based on that type of setting and story. And it's basically, the entire opera is Parsifal trying to come into a realization of who he is and who his mother is. And it took him a very, very long journey to find that self-identity, and that's what the entire 4 opera is about.
Amazing choice. Now, I knew you personally, as a best friend here. I know Wagner is your number 1 composer, but I can't help but wonder, Matt, without spoiling anything about your number 1 choice, could you explain to us why your Wagner selection was your number 2?
Yes, I can. Partially is because there are just too many Wagner to pick from, but also the reason why I picked Wagner number 2 instead of my number 1 was because my number 1 pick is one of those musicals that I truly love, and I've never felt the way that I felt before. Whereas for a lot of Wagner, it was a 4-hour journey, and sometimes in that 1 hour or 30 minutes, you just feel like you feel very drained out. And that's how I feel for like a lot of Wagner, is one of them being Parsifal, obviously. But for my number 1 pick, the entire 2-hour journey was just such an engagement. But still,
I see.
Parsifal is a masterpiece, is a complete masterpiece. I could have very well picked Die Valkyrie and the very classic scene from scene 3, the very famous opening of Die Valkyrie, the bum bum ba-dum bum, and the very strong one. The reason why I picked this one was just the musical subtlety and just the softness that it kind of creeps at you, and I just absolutely love this scene. And the first time when I watched a production, the Met Opera production, I think they call it the Sea of Blood. It was literally, when I watched it, it was visually is so fascinating. It was just these girls, and they were just in the sea of blood, but obviously it's not real blood. It's just red water, and they just dance through it, like ballerinas dance through it, and also sing this scene. And I just absolutely love this scene. For our listeners who don't know, this scene is called the seduction scene. It's basically when Parsifal goes through this journey, he goes through like basically a flower of girls who is trying to seduce him to not make him realize that who he is as a person. And obviously this is why, yeah, I realized that we have gone through a lot of seduction scenes here in our surround sound top 3 picks.
I mean, that's a really beautiful excerpt. Like that's great music. I mean, I'm definitely not a huge fan of Wagner in general. Just like, I don't know, style like never really spoke to me personally. But like, I understand why a lot of people really like it. But like, yeah, I don't know. I guess I just never really got super down with that like sort of like hyper romanticism. It just like never really touched my like aesthetics personally. And then just like the rest of kind of Wagner's background, just kind of, I wasn't like feeling super encouraged to like dig into it more, but I did like this excerpt a lot, admittedly. So
I definitely think that, yeah, I definitely think that like Wagner is definitely like an acquired taste. Like a lot of like great music out there, some of them are like acquired taste. Unlike Tchaikovsky like is loved by almost everyone. Yeah, Wagner, first of all, the 4-hour drain is just sometimes can take a huge toll, and that's also a big reason why it's my number 2. But you also, yeah, the historical context where the anti-Semitism can really catch a lot of people off guard. Actually, a friend of mine who's Jewish, the only reason why she just did not want to listen to Wagner, just don't want to touch it whatsoever, despite his music being so, despite his music being so great, she just said no. She said she just absolutely refused to because she's a Jew, and you know that's understandable.
I mean, yeah, some of his writing is like pretty vile. Like it's like pretty foul stuff. Like it's not
exactly. It can be vile.
It's definitely it's kind of part of the reason why I'm not really down with him. Like besides the fact that the music just like is not really my thing. But I don't know.
So I'll jump in here based on what both of you have shared. Again, here we are with what I said I would refer to later in the episode. Political relevance. This is exactly what, or actually not exactly, but very similar to what we were talking about with Lin-Manuel Miranda and Hamilton, you know. So I think it's fascinating, at least, that, you know, when you put the external aspects of a piece aside for a moment and just look at what you see, what is it I'm looking at here? What am I watching? What am I hearing? You know, I feel like there's a certain universal impression that can come to you just from doing something like that, from taking the external factors away. Yeah, we all know that Wagner was Hitler's favorite composer, but again, Wagner died before Hitler came to power, and before they never knew each other. Nothing, you know. This isn't a political podcast. We're not going to go into it really, but it's just something important to recognize that, hey, you have a right to deny this music, and you also have a right to take it at face value. You know what I mean? And create your own impressions and opinions, because they're yours and they affect you as a listener, as a growing music enthusiast, and as a musician. You know, so
yeah. No, I agree with you for the most part, Darius. But I think if I could just say one more thing about this, I don't want to go on too much about it. But like, I mean, I think it is definitely important to take, like, especially I feel like as a composer, it's like, your sort of ideas beyond just your music are definitely a part of what your art like has to say. So I think that's like a pretty important thing. And like also, I think like studying Wagner's music as like as like technique as music, like we're looking at it because you know it's very well done. Like I'm not going to say that the music is just like completely bad because I think he's like a shitty person or whatever. But like, you know, But then I think there's another thing where it's like, are we going to keep spending time and funds and like effort in like programming these set types of things going forward? I think that's like a pretty different conversation than saying, oh, like I'm going to look at the Tristan prelude because it's like cool, like harmonically. But like, do I really want to go like see the Met like, you know, doing more like Wagner operas like going forward, when like there's probably other things that personally I would be much more interested in seeing. Like, I don't know. I think that's like, those are kind of different conversations in my opinion, I guess.
Of course.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Just one little note on what Darius said. I think what really separates the difference between Lin-Manuel Miranda and Richard Wagner was that
I would never compare those two. Just saying.
I wasn't trying to. I wasn't trying to.
Yeah, I know you weren't. It's just that you know, you were talking about the historical context. That is that. Oh yeah, Richard Wagner was more vile in his approach when it comes to racism, where you know Hamilton was more like the historical context was a bit added to a lot of additional flavor that made it, you know, that made it a lot more different than, you know, and then because of the political stuff that can be involved in it, that also actually speaks to how music can be such a core part of politics, whether it can be good or it can be bad, because after all, music is trying to speak about a message, is actually trying to speak about an emotion, and it can be, you know, it can be positive, and sometimes it can also be negative. It just depends how people use it, you know. I don't think that Wagner, like you said, I don't think Wagner was thinking about, when writing Tannhauser, he was trying to start the entire Hitler movement. But, you know, I don't think that's his intention of writing Tannhauser. But it just happened so that we look through the lens, and historical, we look through the lens, we look at Wagner through the lens of Hitler because of his first Tannhauser, and number two, also just his anti-Semitism. And, you know, I think that's just how history and how people remember him.
Right. Now,
yeah, I think it's also just like important because like composers like Wagner, who are also like kind of, you know, at the time like important and respected like critics and like writers as well, like when you're, you know, kind of validating these kinds of people as like these like geniuses, that like you also have to take into account like the rest of their like work. And it's not just about like whether Hitler like liked Wagner or not, it's about the things that he said and like his own philosophies and his own beliefs. So okay, that's the last thing I want to say about it. But
yeah, no, of course, Zach, your insights are very valued here, but I'm really glad that you shared that, Matt. Thank you so much. So let's go on to the number 2 of Zach. What is your number 2 favorite show?
Okay, cool. I mean, I think I'm actually going to switch around the numbers that I had, if that's okay, because I didn't realize this was like a ascending order, like kind of going towards like hype, you know, the most like exciting thing. I don't know.
No problem.
Okay, but so the second one that I want to talk about, which is also amazing, was there was a Broadway revival of Oklahoma in I think it was 2019, and apparently it started at Bard College a few years before, and then it was also performed in Brooklyn somewhere before it got to Broadway. But I saw it when it was on Broadway, and it was like a really, really kind of special performance. It was very like stripped down and almost had like a kind of bluegrass aesthetic with like banjos and stuff like in the pit, and the musicians were like live on it was not really even a stage, it was like a kind of theater in the round sort of situation, and it was just kind of like a dark, like stripped back version of the musical, and it was just really interesting to see this sort of, you know, classic musical with like a kind of new twist on it and like a more kind of modern, like darker flair to it, and it like left a really big impact on me, and definitely has like influenced some of my own works just in kind of thinking about overall aesthetic and stuff.
Wonderful, Zach. Let's go ahead and listen to People Will Say We're in Love from the Daniel Fish revival of Oklahoma.
Hey, if there's anybody out around this yard that can hear my voice, I'd like for you to know that Lori Williams is my girl.
Curly.
And she went and got me to ask her to marry me.
They'll hear you all the way to Catoosa.
Let her.
Let people say we're in love.
Who can ask. Let the stars beam from above. Who cares if they tell us? Let people say we're in love.
Dude, like,
So beautiful, man.
like, dude, this was sweet like butter, man. Like, I think that this is something. Like, the first thing that comes to mind upon my initial hearing of this is how vast the instrumentation is in this revival. Like, the use of banjo going to accordion, going to synth, like surfer synth, and followed by singing.
It's a pedal steel.
Exactly, a pedal steel. I think that is truly what captures the sort of iconic American approach to like the genre of American music and you know, this sort of Broadway-esque thing, the sort of variety of cultural representation in this. Because there were moments where I felt like, you know, I was listening to this as if I was in Cannes, and then there were other parts of this where I was like, oh, I feel like I'm in Naples or something. You know, it was just really vibrant, very vibrant, and at the same time cafe-esque, almost like something you might hear from Piazzolla as well. You know, really incredible. Like, I'm glad that you recommended this, because this is one that I feel would be like a great like variety, sort of like a great sort of variety and wholesomeness and like full circle work that could really leave you with a lot of different emotions, you know.
Yeah, it really made me appreciate like the songwriting and like the composition of those like old like Rodgers and Hammerstein like songs. I mean, they're just such beautiful songs. But then like the intimacy of like this sort of new instrumentation and like new arrangements and stuff, it's like it really like just connected it with me in a way that I hadn't before. Like, you know, I'd seen the show before like in like community theater productions and stuff, and maybe that was why I didn't really love it, you know, like before. But this just like, it just definitely shed a new light on it. And it also, the sort of like kitschiness of the country songs and everything is also contrasted by like, they kind of highlight some like darker elements of the story that were like not necessarily, you know, looked at as much in the original version. And so I think that sort of combination of things, and they also have some really kind of wacky like electronic music stuff, like after intermission there's like a whole like dream sequence that's like this whole dance, and it's really great. And I think the contrast is really interesting.
So let me just ask for confirmation. Have you seen the show live?
I did see it live. Yeah.
Awesome.
You know what I love about that music? I think you guys, when we're listening to it, you guys can you guys can probably see me just doing like weird gestures. And the reason why I was doing like those weird gestures is I love that there's those moments. See, I like to listen to like these like really little details behind when the banjo tries to slide. That thing is just so, I don't know how to describe it. It's just so cute whenever the banjo tries to slide to the next note. Whenever guitars are just like string instruments in general, whenever they do that, obviously it's trying to imitate like the bluegrass style that Zach was talking about. But whenever they do that, it's just kind of like, it's cute and it's nerve-wracking for a bit. And it's like, I love that one bit.
I totally agree. Like, just so warm and sweet, and just makes you feel like I just want to smile. Exactly, like Disney Pixar's Cars, like that same sort of feeling. You know, I just want to smile. Okay, I know that's a stretch, but whatever. Anyway,
ciao.
You know what this song actually reminds me of? The Sound of Music, 16 going into 17. That's the one.
Yeah.
I am 16 going on 17. Yeah.
It reminds me of that like very country vibe, just like, you know, a couple, you know, singing to each other, having their time, having their love life.
Simple love.
Yeah, exactly. It's sweet. Not Pixar Cars, but
Okay. You again agree to disagree. Fine with that, Matt. You know. Anyway, that's how a lot of people in the world feel about Wagner. Obviously, Anyway, so let's go on to Mr. Farhumans number 2. Mr. Farhumand chose another standard, but this one is a little bit more representative of the beauty behind having vocals. You know, so I chose Carmen, and Carmen is a piece that I experienced both in audience and on stage. I have performed Carmen, and I've just fallen in love with it. I performed the suites, and when I performed the suites, I felt like there was some sort of... I performed the suites before I saw the show. When I performed the suites, I felt like there was some sort of beautiful vocalness to playing, to playing an instrument, to the music, to the writing, that just made me want to know what it felt like to have the voice there. And when I explored the actual piece, I realized that it's such a wonderful, round, full, rich, staple in the opera genre. It's almost like when I think of opera, I don't think of Mozart, I don't think of Wagner, I actually think of this. So this is my insert for you all, the Seguidilla from Carmen.
Je vois un homme qui peut être aimé.
Et de qui?
D'une femme qui lui a lancé une fleur.
Ne me parle plus!
Je ne parlerai plus. Près des remparts de Séville, chez mon ami Las Pastia, j'irai danser le Seguedi, boire du Manfrania. J'irai chez mon ami Las Pastia.
So what do you guys think?
That rocks, man. I like that scene a lot.
Right, the visual. I mean, she is seducing him and trying to get
another seduction scene.
Another seduction. There's something about seductions in shows and in full scale works, especially opera, and even in
drama,
ballet. Yeah,
drama.
Exactly. That just grabs you, orally and visually.
'Cause it's sexy.
So, all right. So, Mr. Matthew, want to elaborate on that, or talk about what about Carmen strikes you?
First of all, this scene specifically is actually inspired by a dance. It's funny because it's actually a Spanish dance, but it's written by a French. It's a very traditional Spanish dance called sacudida. Obviously, I don't know what the dance movements are, what the very intricate details. I don't know what they are, but it's funny how again, when we talk about fusion in so many of our previous music episodes, is that a lot of these composers like to grab onto other cultures, bring them in, and put them in their own masterpiece. And it's even funnier when it's put into French composers, because most French composers don't really like to write outside of their more impressionistic box. And this is one of the few that's not Debussy, that's not Ravel, that would attempt to do that. The second part that I really wanted to say was that every time I hear Carmen, I just immediately go into depression, not because of the music itself, because the music, well, the opera itself is depressing, but it's because as a violinist, we have to play a lot of Carmen works that is meant to be torturous. It's meant to torture us. It's meant to make us play octaves that we really don't have to. It's make us playing techniques that is meant for us to show off, but we really can't because I'm not that great of a violinist. And it just puts me into a depression because I have to think about it. And
Matt, you know how you can avoid that?
Huh?
You know how you can avoid all that stuff?
You don't listen to them.
You don't play those pieces.
I was gonna say, Zach, as a fellow violinist, has to have an opinion on this.
Every time I watch the venue of confrontation, these 8-year-olds start playing Carmen Fantasy, and it's not even like, the there's one version that's already difficult enough, but they play the harder version of that. I think it's called Waxman or something. That version is absolutely ridiculous, and these like 8-year-olds just nail it like it was nothing. And for me, I'm just like, my hand cramps, man. Don't do this to me. Like, okay, let's not play this. Okay, but anyways, Carmen is such a great pick. I love Carmen, except for the depression part. But yeah, Carmen is a great opera. This is a good pick. This is a really good pick.
Yeah, man. No, I'm glad that you guys took it with a semi-open mind, but also had plenty to say based on both of your experiences as violinists. So great. I didn't think. Why didn't it occur to me sooner that we were getting Zach on here and that he is a composer and also a violinist? I don't know why that didn't sink in. If that had sunk in, I might have had more to say to that field of Zach's artistry. But maybe next time.
I feel like you haven't really seen me as in the context of being a violinist that much, because I wasn't playing that much violin at NYU.
I mean, that's true.
Sure,
that's true. Yeah. I mean, you did
play
play in my
the Darius recital orchestra.
You did, and Matthew did as well when we were all in New York. So there was that.
Partners?
You both were stand partners.
Maybe.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
What's funny is that also a lot of just woodwind and also just players in general, they're not familiar with other families of instruments. So that's why Darius probably it didn't occur to him to talk about the specifics of our repertoire, because it probably wasn't the first thing that came to his mind. Oh wait, there's like these Carmen fantasies and all that. But really, every time, because okay, here's the thing. My dad always, whenever we go test out like hi-fi headphones, the first thing that he does is he pulls out Carmen Fantasy, because it's as though like that's the repertoire that it can test the hi-fi headphones.
Test your mix with the Carmen Fantasy reference track. That's the hot take of the day.
No, I think what he does is he wants to listen to like the range, because the violins obviously goes up to the range, and also like the diversification in terms of like, can you go loud, can you go soft in terms of like just the orchestral, can you play high, play low, that type of like just the dynamic of the,
well, if you're going to be listening to mostly classical music, then that makes sense.
Exactly. And every time he uses that as a test, it makes me immediately just go into depression. Yeah. Anyways.
All right, Matt. So why don't we use your number one top show as a means of coming out of that depression?
No, this number one pick is going to make me even more depressed, because every time I see the scene, I cry immediately. This is such a great musical. It's one of my favorite musical of all time. No, it's my favorite musical of all time, Les Miserables, written in 1980 by Claudia Michel Schönberg. And this is another historical context-based story, although it can be there are a lot of love moments involved in this story. This story is based on the French Revolution. It's funny, I picked the American Revolution and now I picked the French Revolution. If I remember correctly, this is actually the 1848 French Revolution, not the 1781. And this is about a group of students who want to revolutionize against the current state of affair, because capitalism was completely dividing the population from the richest and the poorest. And there is these group of students who had their own philosophy, who wanted to bring equality, who wanted to favor equality and liberty and fraternity into France. And they wanted to bring equality into all human beings. And this is what this entire story is about. This one specific scene is when Jean Valjean is about to die. And the reason why I love this scene so much is the vocal, just the pain you can hear in his voice is absolutely like, it crawls in my heart, because this part of the vocal range is so difficult to sing for all male just like tenors in general, and you can listen. It's actually not a very high range, nor is it a very low range. It's actually the middle range. There's this one specific spot, and the reason why the composer wrote it in that range because he wanted that really weak sound, and he wanted that weak sound because Jean Valjean is about to die, so he wanted that really weak voice to evoke that he's about to die. Let's take a listen.
Can I just ask for clarification? Is Jean Valjean the main character?
Yes, he is the main character.
So this was just like a gigantic spoiler alert for someone that hasn't seen.
I mean, Darius, if you haven't seen it by now, I feel like it's like you can't really complain about spoilers.
Okay, no, I'm not. It's I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't seen it.
No, it's okay.
I think it's more of a you problem. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, fine. Okay, let's listen to it.
I think you'll still enjoy it.
Good on high, hear my prayer. Take me now to thy care, where you
Wow.
Yeah, I love that moment. As you can hear, like if you really nitpick the entire recording, there's some parts where it's kind of out of tune, and I don't think it's because of the singer. It's really because that range is so awkward to sing. It's very tough, and for a singer to master that part, it takes years and years of.
Here's a question.
Practice.
Here's a question. Do you think he was using falsetto? Do you think the tenor has to use falsetto in this?
He can't use falsetto. From what I've heard from singers is that they can't use falsetto in that range because first of all, you can tell that it's not a falsetto voice. Number two, if you use falsetto, you accidentally hit that switch where it hits to the next gear, which is not good because you don't want an inconsistent sound in like one specific segment. Falsetto has its own like type of voice, and this, I don't know what this is called, but this part has its own set of voice, and you want to keep, if you want to keep that color consistent, you can't be in falsetto because once you hit below that falsetto range, you're going to hit another gear, which means that you're going to have another color, so you can't really use falsetto in this setting.
So then, Zach, have you had any experiences with your like compositions and your writing and stuff where you've had to write for tenor or a voice that goes up, that's to a pitch range that's out of their comfort zone? What are your thoughts on something like Les Mis?
I guess I'll answer the first part of that first. I mean, I've done like a little bit of vocal writing, not as much as I would like. I definitely like to do more. It was making me think of what's that? I think like the Ligeti piece. I think it's Lux Eterna, where he has like the male voices singing in like the falsetto, and it's like super eerie. But anyways, that's totally different. But yeah, I haven't done a lot of that kind of like stretching registers or like playing around with like vocal registers as much as in my own music. But it's a very cool effect, and I mean, in this song, it's just like so poignant. I feel like because not just because like Jean Valjean is dying, but also because he's saying like that he's sort of dying to let the other, like the younger, I forget what his name is, but it's like the other like younger character, he's like saying like, yeah, and so it's like he's saying like bring him home, like let him live, so like I'll die, so he's like kind of sacrificing himself like in order to let this like younger like soldier or like his like compatriot like go on instead. And so I think that's makes it all the more romantic, I guess, but it's just also just a beautiful song. It's just great performance and everything. Yeah.
I mean, I could have very
iconic
well
for a
picked.
Reason.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I could have very well picked One Day More. Like the most famous ones are Yeah, just like a lot of the most famous ones. But the reason why I picked this was just because I wanted to pick the dynamic of the colors that this entire production is able to use, and this entire musical is going to be able to use. And this is also like this entire story is basically a John Valjean's like redemption story, from him being a thug, like he wasn't really a thug, to being 20 years in jail, and then slowly just being like thankful to how he's given a second chance. And this is what he's saying. He's really being thankful of how he's being able to given a second chance and being able to love a daughter that's not his, which is Cosette.
Yeah, really, really fascinating. I am embarrassed that I haven't seen Les Mis. I need to go see it. Because there's so much. I feel like there's so much in Les Mis that just gives to the sort of 21st century and even 20th century like cultural contribution, you know, in from that genre, from the musical / opera genre. There's so much from Les Mis I know has become a big part of like how we perceive war and how we perceive the world and how we perceive transcending boundaries and stuff, bridges and not walls, you know. So
Darius, when you get back to New York, we can have a little watch party. Me, you, and
I would love to. I would love to.
Let's do it all together.
Yeah,
yes. You know what, Zach? Why don't you hold me accountable to that? When I'm back, text me and be like, Darius, it's time. All right, so let's go on to Zach's number one.
I think I wanted to like kind of continue with the sort of Americana theme here because we talked about Oklahoma before, and so this next piece is one that I've been really enjoying recently. It's a Steel Hammer by Julia Wolf, and it's sort of like it's a great, like, I guess would it be considered an oratorio? I don't know if that's like the proper word for it, but it's sort of a collection of tellings of the Ballad of John Henry, which is like this old kind of American tale of this guy who was like I guess he was like a steel worker of some kind, and he took on this challenge where he was going to compete against the machine to like, I forget exactly what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to like hammer this nail into the side of a mountain to like clear a space for something, and they had like a new machine that could do that task that he was supposed to do, and so he was taking the challenge of like seeing who could do it first, like the human or the machine, and basically, spoiler alert, but at the end of he wins the competition, but then he immediately drops dead at the end. And so it's like a very intense kind of story of like, you know, industry and like you know, kind of humanity and stuff, which is really, really cool on its own. But so in this piece, Julia Wolf takes like all these different versions of the ballad, which have lots of different kind of details about them, and she brings them together to sort of create this like narrative about America and about you know, all these different things. And there was recently a video like live stream performance of it that I watched, and it was like super cool. The like videographer, the like director of it did a really great job filming the performers and then also kind of editing in some other footage of like different things. And it was written for the Bang on a Can All-Stars, who are, I guess for those of you who are not familiar with Julia Wolf, she was one of the co-founders of the Bang on a Can like group, which along with Michael Gordon and David Lang as well. And Michael and Julie were both on the faculty at NYU, so like we have all, you know, kind of gotten to be familiar with that with their work and Bang on a Can in general. But yeah, this piece is for 3 singers and the Bang on a Can All-Stars, who are their kind of like resident ensemble.
This hammer's gonna be the death of me. This hammer's gonna be the death of me. This hammer's gonna be the death of me. hammer's gonna be the death of me. This hammer's gonna be the death of me. This hammer's gonna be the death of me. 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 This hammer's gonna be the death of me.
Huh. I don't think that hammer's gonna kill her.
Dude, I mean, it did. That's the whole point.
And it's what's interesting too is that this scene is titled Destiny, and I think that's interesting too that kind of plays into how the work ends. You know.
Yeah, well, because it's like, I mean, in kind of the thing is, it's like the destiny is like in all the versions of the story. Like, you know, he wins the challenge, but he dies at the end. So it's like no matter what, you know, kind of the situation was, like what he looked like, what his background was, what his wife's name was, you know, like whatever, what state he was from. Like these are all things that were like explored in some of the different movements. Like they talk about all the sort of attributes of him, all the sort of circumstances of the sort of challenge, the like fight between the two things. But this is like the ultimate destiny. And I think it definitely ties into like a lot of the other sort of themes in a lot of Julia Wolf's pieces, like a lot about like American history, a lot about labor history, and sort of like all those things are very much intertwined and very, you know, powerfully displayed in a lot of these kind of narrative and like storytelling pieces that she's had, like this piece, and then also recently Fire in My Mouth, which was really great as well. I was lucky enough to see one of the like premiere nights of that like before COVID, and that was another great piece. But yeah, it's like a lot of her work is very much tied into that sort of like political stuff and historical stuff, and it's really cool.
Absolutely. Matt, I think you had an interesting reaction to this, did you not?
Well, the reason why I had such an interesting reaction, my reaction was actually I was literally just looking at my keyboard. I was inside my head, I was thinking like, although it's like saying like, I think it's saying like death is like, I forgot what it was, something related to death and the hammer itself. Oh, death is coming to me with the hammer.
This hammer is gonna be the death of me.
Yeah, there you go. And it just continuously repeat that. What I was inside my head, I was thinking like those like a scene where like just one person is just death is flashing in front of his eyes and everything just slows down. You know, it's like slowly he just had to like make that one flash of the moment that he or she, the character, can be alive. Let's see if we can stretch that 1 second to like that 3 to 4 minutes and just, you know, think about how death is gonna like punch the nail in the coffin on that person. And that's what I love about this particular music, because this is such a Zach Mezzo pick. I just knew it because Zach Mezzo, first of all, for listeners who don't know, Zach Mezzo loves contemporary music, like a lot of our other friends, but he's one of them. And this
obviously
this is such a Zach Mezzo pick. And the reason why I love, like, unlike a lot of like the other contemporary music, this one specific contemporary music, albeit it may be a little like quote unquote atonal, but the thing that I love about this contemporary thing is that it was able to evoke a moment and tell a story, and so effectively without using like the conventional language that Darius and I are very familiar with, like with Les Miserables and with Carmen and all that. It was able to use its own language, which was Julia Wolf's own language, and to evoke that one specific moment where it's like this person is slowly coming into a realization that this hammer is going to kill him or her. And I love it.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that has like that, like, you know, intrigues me so much about the kind of like the sound of like Bang on a Can composers and their, you know, their ensemble and everything, it's just like how they kind of we talked a lot about fusion and other things, and they obviously have a connection to like classical music and the sort of like Western, art music, like history, and they definitely occupy like some of that space, but they're also connected to like, folk music and, like you said, Matt, like storytelling, and also like rock and like other genres and things, that kind of rhythmic intensity. It's like, it's not just coming out of that sort of post minimalism sort of, group that they would often be lumped into, but it's also, like it could be like punk rock or, other things where there's like the rhythmic kind of intensity and the drive of it is like the thing that makes it. It's not, like it, I guess you could describe it as atonal, but I feel like the tonality of it is not even really like the thing that would make it, that's not like the important part about it. It's just like the force of it, the energy of it, and like the, there's not that much like harmonic material going on. It's like very small amount of material, but it's just like driving so like hard, and especially in the context of the larger piece, I feel like this like seeing this like movement is even more like powerful because you've been having this kind of whole thing going. This is like the kind of one of the like culminating points.
Yeah, I totally agree how you de-emphasize the aspect of like tonality, and I think that's that's wonderful, and it's also one thing that when Darius and I were talking with Oscar, one thing that we really emphasized towards the end of the show was, the colors on our palettes. It's not just we are one thing, but we're actually versatile because we're trying out different colors. It's not just blues and greens. We're trying shades of blues, shades of greens, and then we want to add another pink or red, and then just to expand our repertoire of colors. And I think this is exactly because you can tell that, like you said, there's a lot of like hard rock elements because of the hard beat in it, but there are also a lot of like minimalism aspect embedded into it, and you can tell like these like fascinating palettes of colors being molded into one specific moment, and it's so telling of what it's so telling, and it's able to tell like such an intriguing story at that one specific moment, even though the materials are easy. But if you really dig deep to it, it's actually very dynamic in terms of the colors.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I feel like with this kind of music, like the sort of restraint of the composer is very important. Like if you overdo it and start putting in too much stuff, then it kind of gets like watered down in a sense. Even though it's like it would be very easy to sort of start like, oh, I'm going to add this, and I'm going to add this, and it's going to be super cool and all these parts. But it's like the fact that it's just this sort of sustaining, like ever slowly sort of changing thing, and then even just one other voice, one other sort of chord change, right? Like one thing can make such a big difference because of that kind of restraint, and so like that tension is like what really like attracts me to this kind of music, and that like I definitely just feel a strong like connection to this sort of style.
What a great choice! What a great last choice. Thank you so much for that, Zach.
Thanks, Darius.
yeah, dude, really, really incredible. And I see now why you wanted that to be the last thing we heard from you, because I totally get the sense of like, hey, this is that Julia Wolf brings your other your other two choices into context, her piece, and
yeah, I mean, they're pretty different, but they're all things that I really like. So there's something that keeps them all together, right?
Of course, right, exactly. So thank you, Zach.
Yeah, thank you.
So finally we come to my number three, not my number three, my number one. This truly is my number one. This one is my all-time favorite, my all-time favorite like show production across the board. I have played this piece. I have been in the pit for this with the full ensemble and the company. I have seen this. I saw it when I was 8 years old. I've seen the movie. I've seen everything around it, and pretty much everybody knows Phantom of the Opera. Phantom of the Opera is an icon. It is easily a staple. Andrew Lloyd Webber's life's work. You look at Andrew Lloyd Webber today, and he's still talking about the Phantom of the Opera and how that is everything to him, and bringing that back into the world ASAP when Corona is Dona. So I think this is a great last show choice to share with you all. This is All I Ask of You.
No more talk of darkness, Forget these wide-eyed fears. I'm here, nothing can harm you. My words will warm and calm you. Let me be your freedom. Let daylight dry your tears. I'm here with you beside you, to guard you and to guide you.
Say you love me every waking moment. Turn my head with drops of summertime. Say you make me with you now and always. Promise me that all you say is true. That's all I ask of you.
Let me be your shelter. Let me be your light, your safe.
With that, the Phantom can be my shelter any day of the week. Just let him be my shelter, please.
Ba, 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 ba. Oh, sorry. Never mind. Wrong track.
Yeah, rest
you
in
know
peace
what's
to the
funny is
audio
that
editor of this podcast, man.
That's me.
What's funny is that Darius didn't pick that one music, but he picked the All I Ask of You, and he just had to hit me with the goosebump. And I'm utterly speechless, but I have to come up with a speech in order to describe my speechlessness. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do right now. Andrew Lloyd Webber is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, musical writer of all time. He not only wrote Phantom of the Opera, he wrote a lot of other legendary ones such as Cats. And this just describes not only his prolificness, but also his virtuosity to come up with such famous moments in the musical theater world. And what I love about this music is that this music is actually very tough to sing, because for singers to go that many range, to skip around all the time while being able to sing that one long phrase and belt at the same time is actually, it's very tough for a singer to do all that and invoke the emotion of a couple trying to sing how much they love each other. So, and also again, the female character is being seduced. But speaking of all the seduction scenes that we've,
I think actually in this scene she isn't seduced. She's already like won over.
No,
because
I'm just saying, like, the heroine was seduced during the story. I'm not saying like this.
Right. I when I had the great honor to play this, I played this 4 years ago. It was actually a program that came out of my high school music department. And that was like a collaboration with the theater department in our school. And it was actually, we actually won an award, like that high school performance. We won an award for U.S. National Youth Theatrical Performances or something. I don't remember what it was called, but it was the sensation of just being able to like pour your heart and soul and feel like every aspect of the team in the company plays a big role, just filled my heart and made me feel like, this is one of the pieces that makes me want to love wanting to be a musician and a performer. It's and it's not even just All I Ask of You. Music of the Night, Christine Daae. There's so many moments in this musical that just grab you. Even the ending with the death of the Phantom, quote unquote death of the Phantom, or even like the first time he takes off his mask, it's just wow, and the heartfeltness is just all there, I mean, what do you think of all this, Zach? You know the Phantom pretty well too.
I mean, I just, this is a great song. I mean, I love like the melodic writing. I mean, just from like a purely like musical perspective, not even talking about like the story or like the kind of emotions of it or anything, but just like it's just like a really great songwriting. Just like it's a simple melody, but it's just super powerful without like doing too much. And I don't know, I love that.
I will share also something I forgot to mention. This All I Ask of You, this track is in D flat major. Music of the Night is also in D flat major. and their melodic like progressions, the way the melody goes up and down, are so similar in that when you get to later parts of the work, like when they have their last little moment together before he dies, it's meshing both All I Ask of You and Music of the Night. Like the melody meshes between and sort of creates an even bigger fullness, almost something you might see out of like a symphony. You know, it's just like totality. You know,
yeah, I mean, also D flat major is just like the best key. Like
it is the key of love and moonlight. You know.
You know what? One more funny thing is that when I was listening to the ending, the I was like, you could have just ended like on an A flat, but you just had to do that little na na na, and every time it does that, it's like
and then you go back to the E flat. It's
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
something. It's almost like you guys were talking about what's specific to violin. Here's something that's specific to bassoon. The Poulenc trio for oboe, bassoon, and piano. Noah Horowitz, our friend Noah Horowitz, he would know this pretty well. We played it together. It's one of those moments where it's just like you're taking that almost French grab of the listener's ear, you know, that just sort of pulls them back in, you know, like a French kiss or something, you know. It's amazing. It's wonderful. So
this is the next seduction scene. Darius talking about French.
maybe on another episode. But anyway, all right. So that was our top 3 shows, our round robin game here.
Fun.
And it was so much fun. Before we wrap up, Zach, I'll share with you that we have a little tradition. I think you've listened to a couple of our episodes before. We have a tradition called Music of the Week, which is where basically we go around and we share what music have you been listening to this past week, and what do you think you're going to start listening to this next week? Where's your taste going? So, you want to go first, or you want one of us?
Sure, I can go first. I think recently I've been listening to the latest Japanese Breakfast album. Really like that one. It's super fun, and there's some really great songs on there. I think the album is called Jubilee. I think it's really really nice album. What was the second? What am I going to listen to next week? Is that the next question? Here, can you come back to me on that, and I'll decide what I'm going to listen to next week. I barely decided what I'm listening to this week, so you guys can go first, and then I'll come back to you with that.
All good, dude.
Since we had to do this show, Darius tortured me to pick one of many Wagner's music. So during my pick, during this week, while I'm picking, I've been listening to a lot of Wagner stuff. One being Tristan and Isolde's Liebestod, which is the ending of the Tristan and Isolde, the 4-hour journey opera, and this is the icing on the cake, which is it's one of the greatest arias of all time, if not the greatest. This is typically played. This is typically played with a soprano, but sometimes it's played without, and it's equally just as satisfying without the solo singer as with. So going into next week, I actually wanted to do this pick, but because I really struggled to pick my top 3, so I'm gonna use my honorable mentions in my music of the week, which is going to be Abduction of the Seraglio, by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And the reason why I picked this opera is because this is such an underrated opera, specifically the bass aria. And the reason why I picked this one is because a lot of people probably know Marriage of Figaro. A lot of people probably know The Magic Flute, but no one knows The Abduction of Seraglio. And The Abduction of Seraglio is the first German opera ever written in human history. And that's not the only part that made it significant. The biggest part was that it was actually based on a story in Turkey. Now, for most Mozart people who know about this, there was a moment in Mozart's lifetime where he wrote a lot of things that are based on Turkish themes. One including his 5th violin concerto, the other one being his the very famous Turkish march. So this is how he embraces all those cultural, all those Turkish cultural thing, along with the symbol, which originated actually from Turkey, and he brought all those elements into this one specific opera, which is called The Abduction of Seraglio, and it's actually a absolutely hilarious opera. You guys, yeah, this is my music rec of the week.
Nice. Yeah, so I guess I'll go next. My music of the week has been quite a pish posh of different things. Last week, I was, as I was prepping for this, I was doing quite a lot of listening to Tchaikovsky, actually. And when I was studying Swan Lake and revisiting it and realizing how much I loved this piece, I came across a number of pop arrangements of Swan Lake that actually captured my ear. One of them was actually a sort of a nice callback to last summer when we started this podcast. I was, in the double life I have as a video gamer, I was playing Paper Mario: The Origami King on Switch, and there was a moment in that where there's a big ballet performance that Mario is sitting in on, and it is a depiction of Swan Lake, and that arrangement was super, super fun. It was like a rock arrangement. So I have been listening to a lot of Swan Lake and Tchaikovsky, and where I think I'm going next is next week. I'm going to be out of town once again since our Japanese entertainment episode was recorded. I went to one place, and next week I'm going to another place. I'm going to be in Hungary for a festival I've been to a few times. I'm going to be listening to a wind sextet by Leos Janáček called Mladi, or Youth, which is a really fun piece that has basically a standard wind quintet with the inclusion of bass clarinet. And bass clarinet gives that juicy, beefy, lucid and goof and not goof. What is goof? Like uber good sound that just gives to like a sort of playfulness that you might hear from a child or like child's play. And that's a really wonderful piece that I might want to recommend to my listeners. Anybody that's interested in listening to some more wind music, go check out Janáček's Youth for wind sextet. So, Zach, you want to come back to us with what you think you might be listening to next week?
Also, I just want to say I think that's a great addition to the wind quintet, and I would maybe be so bold as to say that it might be also cool to just sub the French horn for a bass clarinet on maybe just to try. I don't want to offend any horn players out there, but wind quintet's a tricky ensemble to write for. Let me just.
That's right. Anyway, there are plenty of wind quintets with piano too.
I don't want to get in trouble with the French horn community, but I think I've had multiple friends kind of encourage me, and I've been meaning to get into this band for a while. But I wanted to listen to some albums by the band Swans. I've heard a lot about them, and I know they're doing some cool stuff. So I've been definitely wanting to listen to some of their stuff. And also one other thing. I listened to it a little bit, but I have it pulled up over here, but there's this new music group called Wild Up, and they did a pretty cool recording like a couple weeks ago or months ago of the composer Julius Eastman, some of his music, and I've been meaning to give that like a deeper listen because I listened to some of it and I liked it a lot. So those are you get two things for next week.
Very cool. Well, on that note, I want to thank you all so much for listening to today's episode of SUR Round Sound. Our top 3 shows, our round robin game of exercising our love for music and our passion for large scale productions and our eagerness to sort of come back to those later this year and hopefully next year as well. Zach, Mezzo, everybody, let's thank him so much for being here. Such a great pleasure and an honor to have you, my friend. I am very much looking forward to seeing you again soon in person and hopefully collaborating in some way in a musical sense and also just as friends. It's important that we
should collaborate over some drinks.
Yes, collaborate over some drinks. So this is SUR Round Sound. I'm Darius signing off, and Zach is signing off. And Matt, any final words?
Nope, I think that's it. Thank you for letting us be on the show.
All right. My pleasure, and take care, everyone, and see you again next time.
Peace.